We're going to start today's hearing with a presentation on flock cameras by Art Smith, Sheriff's Office Division Chief.
Excuse me. With my presentation this morning, we have a PowerPoint that we prepared, and I actually got the opportunity to speak with Stanford the Constitution last night and presented this PowerPoint and discussed, and there was a lot of good conversation back and forth and a lot of very good questions from persons who were in the audience since that presentation last night. Actually, at the presentation last night, I knew there was at least one slide that needed to be updated. It was correct as of Thursday, but not correct now. And in addition to that, it has come to my attention that there is a mistake in here. The PowerPoint itself has not been corrected, but I will address that mistake as we go along. If there are more mistakes in here, I apologize in advance. And I apologize to Stanford the Constitution as well for the mistake that's in the PowerPoint and any misrepresentation that I may have given as a result of that. So without further ado, we'll get to the slideshow. So Commissioners, this is a topic of great interest seemingly everywhere. And having to do with automated license plate reader technology. I think there's a lot of concern everywhere in our public around technology, period, not just this technology. So the purpose of this is hopefully to provide some information about what it is, what we actually do with it, what it doesn't do, et cetera, et cetera. What is an automated license plate reader? It's pretty straightforward. It's in the name. Automated ALPRs, I'm going to say, automated license plate readers. They read license plates of passing vehicles, and they collect that data, and specifically they collect snapshots of passing traffic. They do record license plates. They do take photos of the vehicles. And they take that. They tell us where and when those photos are taken. The way that the ALPR technology works is that as one of these cameras sees that license plate, it does automatically run a check against every license plate against law enforcement hot lists for plates that are of interest, plates that make it onto a hot list because they are of interest. The easiest example of that is a stolen car. So if a car is stolen, then we enter it into what's called the Colorado Crime Information Computer or Center, and that is where that information is tracked. And so there is a hot list of stolen license plates that exists. If one of these cameras sees license plate ABC123, then it will cross-check that and say, hey, that license plate or the license plate that is reported to a stolen car. There are other ways that you can enter information into hot lists. I think we're all familiar with Amber Alerts, the case where a juvenile is missing or abducted. Silver Alerts, some people are not as familiar with. Silver Alerts are elderly persons who have dementia predominantly, and they are unaccounted for. Many of them still have the ability to drive, and so there is a Silver Alert is a way to try to find those members of our community. And there's misunderstanding or misnomer about this. If a person has an active warrant, then you can, and there are predicates around it, you can enter a hot list if you know a license plate that is associated with a person that has a warrant. There is not an automated system where every person with a warrant automatically is tied to every person, every license plate in connection or anything like that. That simply doesn't happen that way. The cameras take pictures of license plates and vehicles. They do not take pictures of people that are in the cars. And actually I got this question last night. I don't know the answer. I don't know whether, I assume the camera does ingest that information, but the output doesn't show the people in the vehicle. The output simply puts the vehicle, where it's at, when it's at, and the license plate if there is one associated to it. And it probably would be worthwhile adding to this PowerPoint a flock photo, what it actually looks like. And as someone who has seen them, when you look at the windshield, it's just grayed out wherever a person would be. So I know there is public concern about facial recognition or racial profiling or those types of things, and that's simply not the product that is received by a law enforcement officer. I don't know why, I don't know the answer to this. ALPR technology is not new. It is not something that occurred in the last year. The community concern certainly seems to be directed at and focused around flock cameras. But Flock is not the only company that provides this technology. There are multiple companies that provide this technology. The Sheriff's Office has utilized LPR technology for some 15 years now. And in this slide, we talk about the fact that right now we have a mixed bag, if you will, of LPR technology out there. The Motorola system is the system that we've had far longer. We just recently started working with Flock within the last year. So we've had Motorola LPR technology for 15 years, and we have combined, when they're all fielded, 11 Motorola units out there. But we have just about this time last year is when our Flock cameras started to be installed. We lease 11 cameras from Flock, and those are at intersections, at strategic locations around the county. This network, or the combination of this networks, let me take a step. So the slide says, I'm not even on the right slide. Well, let's fix that. How about that? Let's look at that slide. Okay, that's better. The combination of these technologies, real-time alerts, and that's what I was going to back up to. I talked about real-time alerts in an earlier slide, and I want to explain what that means. If a stolen car license plate goes by an ALPR, it's not an immediate notification to every law enforcement officer. That's not how that happens. That's how that happens on TV. What happens is that if you are a Flock user, and if you have a Flock account, and if you either receive texts or messages from them, or you have your Flock account up, then it will send that message to say, this vehicle passed that camera at this date and time. But it's not like everyone in the Sheriff's Office receives that information. And in the instance of a stolen car, then any officers that are in that area then have to go to that area and look for it. But the point on the community impact that now that I'm on the right slide, the green community impact is trying to drive home is that in Mesa County, particularly in our jurisdiction, we have one of the lowest auto theft rates in all of the state of Colorado. And we also have overall lower crime stats in almost every metric than the state of Colorado. And this is one of the tools that we use to affect that. In 2025, and this is a stat that if you look at our crime rates on the CBI website and you look at the state average, on the theft of auto theft specifically, if your car was stolen in the county of Mesa, we were 3.5 times more likely to A, recover your car, and or B, solve your case and hold someone accountable than the state average. So that speaks to community impact. I'm going to turn the page on here and forward the slide at the same time. We did a study, our crime analyst did a study of cases in which our deputies, our investigators utilized ALPR technology. So that would be both the existing system that we already had and the Flock system. Between January 1 of 25 and July 29 of 2025, we looked at 108 cases in which we had utilized ALPR technology, and these slides go into detail about what our results were. Out of the 108 cases where it was used, there were only 13 of those 108 cases where it did not net a benefit. There was not a law enforcement benefit from using that technology. whether that resulted in an investigative lead that allowed us to further investigate a case or solve a case, whether that resulted in stolen property recovered, whether that resulted in us locating and apprehending a wanted person or an offender. 88% of those cases, or rather whatever 108 minus 13 is, it was valuable. To put that into perspective, just to give you, and I say this just to counter the argument that we use this absolutely ubiquitously and to do all of these things that it seems to be that there is this concern that we're doing. Just to put this in perspective, in that same period of time, January 1 to July 29 of 2025, the Sheriff's Office handled over 28,000 calls for service. That doesn't count cases that we were already investigating from times prior to that. I'm going to talk about two of these in the interest of time. So these are instances, these are just examples. Obviously, we're not going to give names or cases or case numbers or anything like that, but I'm going to talk about the two on the very top. So within the last year, we had a case in which a suspect unknown to a female who lived by herself, an adult female who lived by herself, came to her home, entered her home late at night, and entered her home with the intent to sexually assault her. The victim in this crime did have a home surveillance system, but it was dark outside. It was 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, something like this, and she did not have good lighting in her outside her home to give us a clear or accurate picture of the vehicle. So when we talk about there's license plate and then there's vehicle, it takes pictures of vehicles as well. So predominantly this is used to search license plates, but it does have the ability to search types of vehicles or unique aspects of vehicles. In this case, using a combination of different investigative techniques and technology that is available to us, and including obtaining an LPR photo of a vehicle matching the description of the one from her surveillance footage, we were starting from zero. We were able to identify that person and have that person in custody in less than 24 hours from the time that the crime was reported to us. That is with no identification of the suspect and basically nothing more than a description of the vehicle. That's pretty fantastic. Second bullet point I'll address just briefly. This crimes oftentimes cross jurisdictional boundaries. And the second bullet point talks about a case that started as an incident in Fruita, within the jurisdiction of the Fruita Police Department, moved through the county, made it into the jurisdiction of the Grand Junction Police Department, resulted in a shooting in the Grand Junction Police Department. And our use of LPR technology allowed us to get information to responding officers, which resulted in the almost immediate capture, or rather identification, capture, and arrest of the shooting suspect in that incident. Incident. Let's go to the next slide. This is the slide that does have a mistake on it that I'm going to address. But before I talk about this slide, I need to qualify I'm not an attorney, and neither am I a judge, but we certainly do work with attorneys quite often. Courts have and continue to make rulings, or rather, there certainly is no court ruling of which I'm aware that talks to it being a specific violation of the Fourth Amendment to read license plates at an intersection. The first cite that is incorrect on this, on bullet point number 1, it talks about public exposure, and the case that's cited is Katz versus United States in 1967. That is the case from which the Katz test comes from. And that is the test that the Supreme Court has used having to do with privacy expectations. That site actually We're going to jump forward to 1983, which is U.S. versus Knotts. That case had to do with a beeper that was installed on a vehicle. But in that case, Supreme Court Justice Rehnquist wrote, and I believe I have the quotation correct here, "A person traveling in a car on public roads has no reasonable expectation of privacy regarding their route, stops, or final destination." The second bullet point is the most recent case of which I'm aware. There may be others. That's United States versus Porter, March of this year. That was in the Fifth Circuit. I'm certain it will be appealed. Most cases are appealed. But in that case, the use of LPR does not constitute a Fourth Amendment search. It is a plain view. It is a plain viewing of a license plate on a public road. And again, Supreme Court Justice Rehnquist talked about there is no expectation of privacy operating a vehicle on a public road with a license plate. And it is not subject to the warrant requirement. Another case that I'll just mention briefly is U.S. v. Eliason. That's a Sixth Circuit case in 2006. In which justices discuss the fact that the very purpose of having a license plate is to communicate identification information to officers and state officials. The courts recently, this is my reading and my interpretation, they talk about a municipal grid versus continuous tracking. And I believe the concern and the public fear is that with 11 cameras, we have the ability to continuously track a person, much like this continually tracks all of my movements. And that is simply not the case. And what I've read where they've talked about is cities where they have significantly more LPRs than they have set up what they've described as a municipal grid. And even in that, they're saying that is not continuous tracking. I would posit that with the 22 total cameras that we have, we are far, far from having a complete municipal grid. Talking about the way that we use ALPR technology at the Mesa County Sheriff's Office, we allow it only for official law enforcement investigations. In law enforcement, we have access to an astounding amount of information, and we have to police ourselves all the time. And when we misuse information, we hold ourselves accountable. And if, depending on how bad it is, that can be accountable up to discipline, that can be accountable up to termination, that can be accountable up to never being able to be a police officer in the state of Colorado again, that can be accountable up to and including criminal prosecution. This is another tool that we use responsibly for the purposes of solving crime in our community. We prohibited uses. We do not allow our deputies, our officers, to use this technology for anything having to do with immigration. We do not allow it for just strictly traffic enforcement. We do not allow it for harassment, personal use, or unauthorized searches. We do not allow it to target race, sex, religion, or anything of the nature. We do audit our system. Flock specifically, in response to a lot of the public outcry, has significantly improved their auditing feature, their built-in auditing features, and also their user-selectable auditing features, of which we have chosen to use all of them. So if one of our people at the Sheriff's Office wants to conduct a search using Flock, it logs who they are, it logs when they request the search, and they need to add the case number and either the reason or the offense type for why they are searching that information. On our last slide here, this slide, the tile on the far left of this slide is now outdated. So LPR data, period, ALPR data, and I'm talking about the providers of the technology, not the data that we have access to, is automatically purged 1 year already, and that's pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute. At the time of the printing of this article, Flock, or rather, not the printing of this article, but the completion of this PowerPoint, Flock would allow us to, for an investigative search, not a real-time search, but an investigative search, allow us to search 30 days back. That they announced over the weekend, and it was published by the Associated Press on Saturday, that Flock has decided system-wide, meaning every law enforcement agency that uses it in the nation, is going to be limited to only a 7-day search. So if we have a crime that is reported 8 days, then 8 days after it happened, then we won't be able to use this technology to try to assist us with that. Restricted sharing, and this slide, I need to make some corrections on this slide as well. The Mesa County Sheriff's Office, right, so this isn't talking about Flock and the way that it works or how other agencies use it. This is talking about the way that we, the Sheriff's Office, use this. We do not share our data, so when the license plate reader that we lease reads my license plate, that is not searchable by the federal government. That is not searchable by any other state law enforcement entity. We only share with other Colorado law enforcement agencies. This last slide just talks about our accountability, and I don't think this is going to work. Give me a second here. This, as on that slide, that is the link and the address to our transparency portal. This is our transparency portal. This is live, this is up and running. It has some of the stats here, and when you get here to this area, this lists, if I can work, yep, there we go. These are the Colorado law enforcement agencies with whom we share our data, or rather, if any one of these Colorado law enforcement agencies wants to get into Flock and conduct a search, it will also search our data. So they have the ability to search our data through the fact that we allow this. There are no federal agencies on there. ICE is not on there. There are no agencies outside of the state that are on there. And the reason for that, the reason why we do not allow sharing in this way outside of Colorado, is that you may or may not be aware, Colorado has very strict rules around law enforcement sharing information having to do anything with immigration. And Utah does not have the same laws as Colorado, and neither is Kansas, so those are the reasons why we do that. A couple of closing thoughts for you. I appreciate you listening to me and your time that you've taken. I fully understand public concern about new technologies. I personally, as an individual, I am not a big fan of AI, not a big fan of cell phones. I'm more old school than most, right? I certainly understand that people have a fear of the unknown, or they have a fear of anything new, that when the intent is to be used for something good, it can also be used for something bad. And, you know, maybe the best ever example of that would be dynamite and the Nobel Prize. So I think the story is that Alfred Nobel invented dynamite, and it's been used for good and bad. And when my recall is that his death was inaccurately reported, and he had some moniker as the having been responsible for all these deaths in World War I. And so that's where the Nobel Peace Prize comes from. He wasn't dead. The reports of his death had been greatly exaggerated. The point is this: we can't tell you how every other agency uses this technology. We're not responsible for every other agency that uses this technology. There's a couple different ways that laws get changed that affect law enforcement. One, if the courts come along and they say that is unconstitutional, you can't do that anymore, then we will change the way that we use it, and we will respond accordingly. If lawmakers, whether they be state or federal, come along and say, we believe you need to change this, you can't do this anymore, or we're going to restrict the way that you use this, then we will respond accordingly. This year in legislative session, there was a bill entered into the Colorado legislature, Senate Bill 70, and it had to do with Flock cameras. And I would just remind those members of the community and the public that while you don't have the ability to go to a judge and say, I believe you need to find this unconstitutional, if you are unhappy with a law or you believe that a law needs to be written, then that avenue exists for you. You can petition your Colorado and your federal legislators and ask for those laws to be changed. In the meantime, we do know how we use this technology. It's difficult, people have trust, and it's hard to believe that we are doing it as we say. I know we are not using this technology in the ways that it seems that people are afraid that we are. And as long as we are able, our intent is simply to continue to use LPR technology responsibly, ethically, and within the confines of the law to solve crimes committed against citizens of Mesa County. Thank you for allowing me to present to you today. And if I can just get out of the computer here. If I was long-winded, my apologies.
All right. Thank you, Art, for the presentation. Commissioners, do you have any reports this morning?
I have no reports, but I have a quick comment on flock cameras, if I'm allowed to do so.
Sure.
Art, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I think there's a lot of bad information out there. I think there's a lot of skepticism around these cameras, which I think there should be. ALPR technology warrants a healthy dose of skepticism, criticism, and subsequent transparency from the sheriff's office, which I think you guys have done marvelously, so I appreciate that. The stats don't lie. Mesa County is doing pretty good in terms of property crime, vehicle crimes, in large part due to these types of cameras. I personally am a firm believer in this technology. It gives the good guys the tools to catch the bad guys, and I think we often lose sight of who the good guys are, and the good guys are the sheriff's office, the police officers, and we're giving them the tools to catch those who have stolen cars, stolen kids, trafficking drugs, trafficking humans, and I'm in full support of what the sheriff's office is doing and the way they're doing it, because they're doing it transparently and honestly. So again, to the SO and all those involved in this, thank you. I know you guys take a lot of heat, but you're keeping this community safe, and I couldn't be more proud of what our community's doing.
Thanks, Art, for that presentation. I think people have a lot of questions, and I really wanted to make sure that our community had as much information as possible. If you have any follow-up questions, please reach out to our Sheriff's Department. They can handle these questions. I do want to just let you guys know and our community know that our sheriff is a separate office and it is elected by the people. So we can't tell the sheriff as commissioners what to do in that vein. So if you have questions, you can, and you need answers directly from the sheriff, they'll be able to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you to our Sheriff's Department for coming in and presenting and being available to our community. I really appreciate it.